What if the Marvel Universe went through a moral inversion, meaning all of our heroes became villains, and their greatest villains became heroes? What would their new dynamics and backstories look like? Today I'll be taking a look at a handful of Marvel's top heroes and villains, breaking down what makes them tick, then flipping them on their head to see what these new alternate versions would look like. If you're familiar with DC Comics, this is essentially like their Earth 3, where Superman and Batman are the villainous Ultraman and Owlman. I'm going to be giving that same treatment to Spidey and Thor, as well as a couple others. If you like the inverted characters I spin here, or have ideas for your own swapped Marvel characters, definitely let me know down in those comments. I'll try to respond to as many as I can, and maybe even include your idea in a future video. But that's enough intro, let's start with the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. Matt Murdock is the living embodiment of justice and guilt, a blind Catholic lawyer, the son of a nun, and a corrupt boxer. The kid took a radioactive canister to the eyes while trying to save someone from getting hit by a truck, stealing his sense of sight, but gifting him incredible powers in equal measure, able to hear, smell, feel, and probably taste so well that he can actually perceive the world better than everyone else. With a 360-degree vision known as radar sense, it's basically impossible to sneak up on Matt. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said about his father, Battling Jack Murdock, who was sick of throwing fights and selling his soul for money. So, he chose to finally win one for once. But that got him quickly taken out by the mob. Instilled with an intense anger and sadness at his father's passing, filtered through the strong moral structure provided to Matt by the nuns that raised him, Murdock chose to spend his adult life relentlessly fighting for justice, in the courtroom as a pro bono attorney, and in the streets of Hell's Kitchen as the man without fear, Daredevil. Using his radar sense and intense martial arts training received from his blind mentor Stick, Daredevil is almost untouchable in a fight. His peak athleticism and acrobatic skills are bolstered by the unending rage inside his heart, which every night he struggles to keep caged. He does take out his anger on the criminals he stops, but his Catholic morality is ironclad. No matter how much he wants to, Daredevil does not kill. But he gets really close. He's constantly getting his ass beat, climbing broken and bloody up the church steps and into the confessional. His religious beliefs and his code make him one of the most interesting Marvel street tier characters. How does he square his belief in Jesus Christ with the fact that the God of Thunder flies overhead every other day? How does he justify not killing when straight demons like Bullseye and Kingpin continually victimize the innocent right before his eyes? Or his ears, I guess. That's what makes Daredevil such a fun character. He's all about channeling his desires to do evil into doing good, and the toll that takes on his soul. So, what would it look like if he was a villain? Well, we'd see a Matt Murdock who channels his desires to do good into doing evil. When this version of Matt Murdock was young, he was good-natured, still good enough to save someone from a runaway truck and get splashed with toxic chemicals, making him blind. But his father, Battling Jack, was less good. He never cared about dishonesty and was happy to throw fights as long as it made him money. That is, until the entire corrupt betting pool was discovered by the NYPD, and Jack was thrown in prison. Learning of his father's crimes, Matt was still raised by nuns and still decided to study law, but not because he was interested in justice. This Matt Murdock wanted to get his father out of prison even if he was guilty. As Matt studies to become a lawyer, he starts applying his legal knowledge to the Bible and catechism that the nuns tried to teach him. Treating them like court cases, he finds loopholes that he can exploit. He twists scripture to fit his means. Hebrews 12:6, the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, meaning I can take out my anger on you and beat you half to death, and that's just God's love. He earns money to attend law school by committing petty crimes, learning to use his radar sense to get himself out of jams and win fights with other criminals that try to rip him off. His first court cases are defending some of these other criminals, using his ability to sense heartbeats to learn about the jury and blackmail them. Matt Murdock becomes infamous amongst Hell's Kitchen as a hero to all criminals, able to get anyone off for any crime. A Saul Goodman type character, the ultimate criminal lawyer, and he soon becomes known as Saint Murdock. All the criminals know, if you get caught with damning evidence, just pray to Saint Murdock. He will save you in your time of need. Of course, you'll owe him a favor at some point, but that's a small price to pay. As Saint Murdoch, Matt quickly comes to own practically every part of Hell's Kitchen. Every criminal loves him, the police know they can't catch him on a single charge, and when the families of victims come to curse him out for letting murderers walk free, he just smiles and responds to them, "We know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. My actions are simply a part of God's plan." Of course, he's still blind, and a few rival criminals do try to kill him, but each one he can always see coming from a mile away, effortlessly dodging their shots and stabs, doling out righteous justice in turn. He is untouchable. Many people believe his ability to see without seeing is a blessing from God, proof that his constant spouting of Bible verses is more than just a quirk of his personality. This version of Matt Murdock is completely despicable. Who can defend Hell's Kitchen against his untouchable persona that bends the legal system to its will? Well, Wilson Fisk is the Kingpin, a towering man, 500 pounds of muscle, who has his fingers in every single criminal enterprise across New York City. Originally a poor, bullied, deeply troubled child, Wilson constantly saw his father committing crimes and physically abusing his mother. Eventually, he snapped and killed his own father to save her, an act that solidified his twisted worldview. The greatest men are those with the power to impose their will on others, no matter the method. Fisk spent his youth making sure he would never be powerless again. Both a bruiser and a strategist, he slowly worked his way across the gangs of New York, uniting all of them under his control, building an unmatched criminal empire with enough wealth to get anything he wants, which includes bribing and blackmailing the police to let him continue his crimes unabated. Kingpin is naturally impossibly strong. He can toss you through a brick wall or crush your skull in a single hand. His gruesome, violent acts are hidden away by the story that he tells the public. He's a philanthropist who collects art and protects his community. And that spotless image is represented by the perfect white suit he wears at all times. Plus, he's able to pay off the media to keep that idea in the public's mind. But he's not totally untouchable. There is a reason Daredevil is able to take him down. Kingpin has one major weakness in his wife, Vanessa. He cannot be cold and uncaring when it comes to her, and his strategic chess master mind often starts to fall apart when she comes into the crosshairs of one of his enemies. So, how do we make someone so selfish, arrogant, and rageful into a hero, one who can challenge the empire of Saint Murdoch? When Wilson Fisk was a boy, he often saw his father committing crimes and physically abusing his mother. He hated the way his father acted and was nearly going to intervene one day, but his mother beat him to the punch. Finally sick of the abuse, she had bought herself a gun, and in self-defense, killed her husband while Wilson was watching. The gun had been bought illegally, and Fisk's father owed quite a bit of money to other criminals. So the boy and his mother were forced to go on the run from both New York's police and underworld. Growing up this way, Wilson learned an important lesson. Often, people have to break the law in order to protect themselves or to see justice. Not all criminals are equally evil. Some could even be great men. In an effort to keep his mom safe and create a world where less people were forced to do the wrong thing to get the right outcome, he decided he would take on that burden. He would become a criminal who worked for the people instead of against them. Fisk spent his days like a Robin Hood figure, stealing to help the poor, tracking down murderers to put them down himself, all while making a name for himself as the giant, unstoppable man who has everybody's back. He even befriended would-be criminals like the Tinkerer, his positive influence over them, saving them from a life of bad choices. And in return, the Tinkerer built him a gift, a pair of mechanical gauntlets to amplify his already incredible strength. A different class of criminal, one who protects the innocent, Wilson Fisk came to be known as Mr. Big. As Mr. Big, it doesn't take long before someone asks him for help. A poor bartender down on his luck, his brother is being framed for a crime he didn't commit. The police aren't helping at all, and the lawyer behind it is none other than the infamous Saint Murdoch. Fisk agrees to use his connections, the favors he's owed, and if it comes to it, his gigantic metal fists to take down the corrupt lawyer and legal system keeping his city down. Up next, taking a break from street tears, let's get a little fantastical, huh? Thor is the god of thunder, crown prince of Asgard, wielder of Mjolnir, the hammer that holds the heart of a cosmic storm. First son of Odin the Allfather, he was raised in Asgard with the certainty that he would one day rule the 9 realms, preferably after smashing everything that looked at him funny. Arrogant, brash, and drunk on his own legend, he started wars for sport until his father, who was tired of the property damage, sealed away his thunder powers within Mjolnir, only accessible if he could just become worthy of them. Eventually, he learned the humility necessary to once again wield the hammer. When he finally proved himself worthy, Mjolnir came screaming back into his hand, and the thunder returned with it. But something new came too. A protector's heart that bleeds for every life he once thought beneath him. Now he serves as Midgard's protector, defeating otherworldly threats against the little blue marble he came to love during his time banished here. Immortal, nigh indestructible, and able to call down lightning from the sky, Thor fights frost giants and dark elves, but his real battlefield is the space between God and man, trying to be both, to deserve the throne he was born for, and serve the mortal-covered planet that he chose. To make Thor into a villain, we essentially just need to invert his character arc. What if, after being banished from Asgard, he didn't try to become worthy of the hammer, and instead of learning his lesson, doubled down on his pride, his lust for battle, and his desire to rule as king of Asgard? In this version, when Thor tries to lift Mjolnir on Earth and finds that he cannot, he simply gives up, deciding to claw his way back to power the fun way, killing every other god and magical being he can find, slowly acquiring their artifacts and mystical energies. Much like in the Jane Foster Mighty Thor run from 2014, this unworthy Thor Odinson still maintains much of his godly strength and durability, using his axe, Jarnbjorn, to battle foes instead of his hammer. And with his incredible strength, Thor makes it quite a ways through the pantheons. He gets beat up a lot, but manages to find the Gem of Infinite Suns to give him the firepower of 1,000 stars. Then he recruits the Enchantress, accepting her love and her magical amps to his power. Seeing the havoc he's causing, Odin decides his son needs to be stopped, and searches the cosmos for a mortal worthy enough to wield Mjolnir, eventually finding Beta Ray Bill. But even with the power of Mjolnir, Bill isn't strong enough. He manages to take off Thor's right hand, but Thor wins the battle, killing him. Thor then attaches Jarnbjorn to his arm, enchanting it with blood magic, and now, finally at a strength he deems acceptable, he decides to confront Odin. Thor smashes into the royal palace, causing Frigga to flee with their young son Loki. Seeing how dark Thor's heart has become, Odin denounces him. He is no longer Odin's son, but now son of no one, Angin's son. They clash, and Odin manages to take out one of his eyes, but it's not enough. Angin's son kills his former father and takes a seat as the new king of Asgard. Now a cruel despot, Angin's son decides to treat Asgard as an empire ready for expansion, invading the other 9 realms, waging war against the dwarves, dark elves, and yes, the humans of Midgard. As warrior king, he relishes in joining in on the battlefield, an unstoppable berserker that cuts down anything and everything in his path. And as a final middle finger to Odin, who banished him years ago and put him on this path, Angin's son keeps Mjolnir in his throne room, proudly displayed on the chunk of rock where Beta Ray Bill dropped it, as no one has been able to lift it since. He keeps it there as a challenge. Anyone bold enough to oppose Asgard is free to try and lift it before battling him, as he's confident he can cut them down even if they wield his old power. But, of course, no one would ever be that bold. You'd have to be awfully egotistical. Which reminds me, Loki is the god of mischief, the living lie that walks like a prince, Asgard's silver-tongued shadow, the adopted frost giant and younger brother of Thor, who lives with a perpetual chip on his shoulder. Loki was always second best, which annoyed him because he was always sharper, more clever. He wasn't blessed with strength like Thor, and grew to resent his brother more and more as the years passed. So he chose a different skill set: secrets, illusions, and lies. Loki is perpetually scheming something, usually a way to usurp power and take the throne of Asgard for himself, and often at the expense of mortals, who he views as beneath him as a matter of cold fact. When Thor learned his lesson of humility, Loki only became more brazen in his pursuit of power and glory, all to fill the hole in his heart. He never felt as though he belonged, or that he was worthy of love, and so he demands it now as God of Mischief. He's perpetually backstabbing everyone he teams up with, always looking for a new opportunity to manipulate and pull strings, to put himself in a position to be worshipped and revered. Loki is despicable and smarmy, but undeniably charming, which makes a heroic version of him so much fun to imagine. In the version of Asgard where Odin was killed and Angun's son took his place, Frigga managed to escape with the help of Heimdall, her young son Loki in tow. With nowhere to turn as Asgard soon fell to the Angunson regime, Frigga was forced to hide away in the one place that would help her protect her son, his birthplace, Jotunheim, land of the frost giants. Here, she made a hasty deal with them, help her raise her son into a warrior, and when the day comes that he is strong enough to face his brother and take back Asgard, the nation's prosperity will be shared with Jotunheim as well. The warlike frost giants accept, and from that day, Loki is trained in both combat and the magical studies of his mother. This version of Loki has no reason to keep the appearance of an Asgardian, and as such, lives in his natural blue skin. With the disappointment of Thor's villainy, Frigga gives all of her attention and love to Loki. He's not raised with a hole in his heart. Instead, he has a burning desire to avenge his father Odin and return Asgard to the paradise it was before Angun's son invaded. And beyond that, seeing the loving relationship Loki has with his Asgardian mother, the Frost Giants are slowly changed as well, taking after their lost prince, their society reshaping towards nobility and justice over ruthless warmongering. Eventually, Loki is ready, last son of the House Lefason and lost prince of Asgard. He leaves to embrace his destiny. This is Loki, the lost son, a noble warrior and courageous man, but he's still got a tremendous ego, because he's been told his whole life that he's basically destined to save the Nine Realms from his brother, which makes him just as swaggering as you'd expect. He's got all the magical abilities of illusions, invisibility, and shapeshifting, but he's also trained his frost giant body to be tremendously strong and swift, enough to tangle with the best of Asgardian or Valkyrie warriors. And he carries with him one final gift from Odin, thrown to him with his dying breath: Gungnir, the spear that never misses and always returns. With these tools and his wits, Loki travels all about the Nine Realms, liberating small areas from the Asgardian Empire and romancing the local women like a swashbuckling trickster, slowly building up intelligence for the day he and the Frost Giants plan their attack on the Asgardian palace. And every moment until that day, Loki ponders, when he faces down Angun's son for battle, in the place where his father was struck down, will he be worthy to wield the hammer against his brother? Yo, are you enjoying this video? If so, you should check out my Heroes vs. Villains series, where I take the good guys from one universe and pit them against a brand new set of villains. I've covered Marvel, DC, video games, anime, cartoons. They're a ton of fun, so definitely go watch. After you've completed this video in its entirety, like, subscribe, left 20 comments, and join my channel membership, of course. But seriously, that playlist is right here and also linked down in the description. Alright, back to it. The brotherly battles between Thor and Loki are always entertaining, but for the original Marvel family drama, we need to take a look at the first family themselves, the Fantastic Four. Now, I know that we technically already have an evil version of Reed Richards, the Maker from Marvel Ultimates, which I hear is quite good, particularly the Spider-Man run, but I haven't read those comics. Don't get me wrong, I have a fairly basic understanding of the Maker. He's basically what if Reed went insane and tried to play God by making his own universe, which sounds dope, and I should really get around to reading that run. My point is, this will be a slightly different take, with more focus on his relationship with the other members of the Fantastic Four, and of course, an inverse of his main villain too. But if the ideas I lay out here end up being too similar to the Maker, I'm sure you will all educate me down in the comments. Cool? Cool. Reed Richards is the smartest man alive and the most exhausted dad in the multiverse, a human rubber band who can stretch his body to impossible shapes, though his heart never quite learned how to. Once upon a time, he was just a shy, gangly prodigy who thought the stars were close enough to grab if he built the right ship. He dragged his best friend, Ben Grimm, his girlfriend, Sue Storm, and her reckless little brother, Johnny, into untested cosmic radiation because his curiosity always outranked his caution. The cosmic storm in space rewrote their DNA and gave birth to the Fantastic Four. Reed became Mr. Fantastic, able to extend, flatten, or fold himself like living origami. Sue, the Invisible Woman, able to become translucent and create force fields harder than diamond. Johnny turned into the Human Torch, a walking supernova with the maturity of a lit match. And Ben, poor Ben, became the Thing, 8 feet of orange rock and heartbreak, the strongest man alive who just wants to be held without breaking someone. Together, they live in the Baxter Building, but they act as scientific explorers of the unknown, traveling the stars, different dimensions, times, alternate realities, not to mention spending a good chunk of their time saving the planet from the horrors they happen to discover. The Mole Men, Galactus, Annihilus, take your pick. The important thing about the Fantastic Four is that they are a family. They love each other dearly, and though they fight, they always try to put one another first. Reed is at the center of it all, his incredible mind constantly confounded by emotional and moral dilemmas. He's either obsessing over his newest invention or toiling over the ethics of their latest discovery. Despite his cold scientific look at the world, Reed really is about as well-meaning as you can get. He's always looking for the answer to what is the correct choice, the smartest move with the most optimal outcome for everybody. Unfortunately, he gets lost inside his head all the time, which is why Sue, Ben, and Johnny are there to pull him back to reality. So, how do we make him into an asshole? Well, I think we start at his inception. When this new version of Reed Richards was inspired to explore the stars, he didn't want to share the glory with anyone else. It was very important to him not only to learn the secrets of the universe, but to keep them for himself. When his ship was accosted with cosmic rays, he was still transformed, his body stretching and contorting, but something else expanded as well: his ego. This version of Reed is driven mad by the idea that he is not only the smartest man alive, but also the first in a new race of super beings. He makes it his goal to understand and master the cosmic rays that transformed his body, to further evolve into a god with mastery over all of reality. Essentially, he intuits that something like Franklin Richards is possible, and makes it his goal to become just that. His body no longer follows conventional physical laws, and his mind is similarly unbound by rudimentary moral frameworks that have prevented humanity from achieving godhood so far. Dr. Richards, however, is the exception. Beginning his experiments, he starts by kidnapping new test subjects. First, those he was once close with, his ex-girlfriend Susan Storm, her brother Johnny, and his childhood friend Ben Grimm. He subjects them to countless experiments, using cosmic rays, mutating them into terrifying parodies of their former selves. I really want to lean into the mad scientist motif of the 50s and 60s. Each of the other three his own little Frankenstein's monster. Sue is mutated into a ghost who can't speak or touch anything. She can only interact with the outside world using a special communicator that Reed built. She's invisible and intangible at all times, so he uses her to conduct spying operations for him. Johnny's fire erupts from beneath his skin. It burns away his flesh and is agonizing to use. He would be in constant pain, but Reed gives him drugs that turn off his pain receptors in order to keep him loyal. Ben is turned into a golem like the Thing, but far worse. His face and hands are covered in flat, immobile rock, meaning he has no eyes to see, no ears, no mouth, not even fingers. Sue can at least observe the outside world, but Ben is reduced to a cursed existence of silence. The only thing he can hear are Reed's commands, sent to him through telepathic instruction, and if he chooses to disobey, he gets punished with days of silence. Dr. Richards uses his growing army of monsters to establish for himself a base of operations in a remote part of Eastern Europe, and sends them out on missions to steal technology and resources to help conduct his research. He is a heartless scientist gone mad with power. It would take a supernatural miracle to finally put an end to his schemes. But speaking of supernatural, Victor Von Doom is the armored monarch of Latveria, the man who turned a scarred pride into a global religion and decided the world was broken because it lacked him at the center. Born in a Romani camp under a baron's boot, he taught himself sorcery from forbidden books and science from stolen scraps, promising his dying mother he would conquer death itself, both to save her and to prove to himself that he could. One reckless experiment to reach her soul in hell went wrong. One tiny miscalculation, and the blast left his face ruined, marked with a scar. He was cursed with an imperfection that was undeniable by all who saw him. But Doom's pride was so great that he rejected the imperfection and declared that the universe was guilty, sentencing it to kneel to him. That day, he built himself an iron mask, and while it was still hot from forging, pressed it onto his face, vowing to never again remove it in public. On that day, he became Dr. Doom, a genius beyond all others, including Reed Richards, according to himself. He's a sorcerer rivaling Strange, and tyrant who rules his own nation with a literal iron fist. But what's particularly interesting is that his subjects actually really love him. Despite his dictatorial rule, Doom is right about pretty much everything, so living in Latveria is kind of the best. In fact, he's all but had it confirmed that his genius could save the entire world if he was just able to conquer his pride. The pride that makes him hate the one mind who truly challenges him, Reed Richards. Doom hates Richards so damn much. It's unbelievable, because he's basically like Doom's facial scar as a person, a constant reminder of his imperfection. But that said, Doom very much lives up to the second smartest guy ever role. His magically infused armor is strong enough to tank punches from the Hulk. His army of Doombots have fooled even the gods, and he's held impossible powers like the Infinity Gauntlet and the Energy of the Beyonders just because he wanted to prove that he could. Dr. Doom is the ultimate bad guy, the pinnacle of technology and magic wrapped up in the coldest, most vindictive and spiteful heart a human can muster. And that is why we love him. I'm sure you can imagine transforming him into a hero was a bit of an undertaking, but honestly, he was the most fun to imagine. Born into a peaceful country protected by a brave knight to a centuries-old family of Romani mystics, Victor Von Doom chose to dedicate his study of magic at a young age to cure his mother of her early-onset Alzheimer's. In a few short years, he had become the greatest mage their family had ever known, but it wasn't enough. His mother passed away before he could cure her. He was going to seek out a way to return her from the dead when he stumbled onto an earth-shattering revelation. The Von Doom family had been blessed a millennia ago by the sorcerer Merlin, and gifted a set of magical armor with the power to topple armies. But there was a catch. The armor was tied to the virtue of humility. All who don it swear an oath of humility, promising to never boast and never seek to understand the way the magic works. For the arcane magics are from a higher power, and not for mortal eyes to see, not for mortal minds to understand. If he were to ever learn the workings of the magic that flows through the armor, he would lose it. Doom's mother was the previous owner of the armor and sworn protector of Latveria, a secret which she only revealed to him in a letter after her death. Victor was faced with a choice: accept the bonds of mortality with a humble heart and follow after his mother as the new protector of Latveria, or study the magics of the armor and use it to bring her back from the dead, in the process ruining the armor's magic and leaving his homeland unprotected. Racked with guilt and sorrow, Victor ultimately chose to live as his mother wished, bearing the grief of never seeing her again. He put on the armor and became the protector of Latveria. Doom Knight. As Doom Knight, Victor is practically unstoppable, with a burning magic blade that can cut through anything and spells to create shields, portals, illusions, and duplicates of himself. He battles the mystical and military threats against his homeland. He never removes his mask, so no one will give him praise for his heroic actions. He's known by the people of Latveria as their silent protector, an unknown hero tied to honor and destined to die protecting the innocent. And when Reed Richards chooses a Latverian mountain range to build his remote laboratory and kidnap Latverian citizens for his twisted experimentation, Doom Knight is the one who storms his castle. Their rivalry becomes the stuff of legends, Doom Knight forced to do battle with his transformed countrymen, swallowing his pity for Sue, Johnny, and Ben as he's forced to fight them over and over again. Every time, Reed has some new scientific horror to throw at him, Victor barely escaping with his life. One day, he will likely die in battle, falling in a tragic fight against the invading Dr. Richards, but the day that happens, Victor will finally be reunited with his mother in heaven. And on that day, the people of Latveria will join together with one cry from their collective hearts, giving a final thanks to their courageous hero. All hail Doom. Finally, how can I talk Marvel heroes and not mention the Webhead? Peter Parker is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, New York's resident superhero that protects their streets from petty crime and failed science experiments turned mutant monsters, all while tackling the drama of schoolwork, balancing multiple jobs, getting tangled up in love triangles, and just about any other relatable life situation you can imagine. Peter is the everyman with a heart of gold. He's a chemistry genius, forced to work a demeaning job as a photographer for an overbearing boss, constantly late on rent, perpetually unlucky in love, and still the guy who will stop to help an old lady cross the street even when the city is on fire. Bitten by a radioactive spider during a school trip he almost didn't go on because Uncle Ben and Aunt May couldn't really afford it, he gained the proportionate strength, speed, and agility of a spider, plus that handy spider sense that screams danger in the back of his skull, and the ability to stick to literally anything. Walls, ceilings, the subway when he can't afford the fare. He capitalized on these superhuman powers using his scientific genius, developing perfectly strong and sticky web fluid, along with wrist-mounted launchers that let him swing all about the city and instantly trap anyone with a whip of his wrist. At first, he used these incredible gifts selfishly, showboating for cash and fame, until the night he let a burglar go because it wasn't his problem, only for that same crook to kill the man who raised him. With great power comes great responsibility. This was the last lesson Uncle Ben ever gave him, carved onto his soul with grief and guilt that he still carries under the mask decades later. So Peter fights, endlessly, thanklessly, because someone has to, because he can, and because every time he thinks about quitting, he hears Ben's voice in his heart. That is Peter Parker, a walking paradox of bad luck and unbreakable decency. Now, before I explain what Spider-Man would be like as a villain, I want to do this section a little differently, explaining both the hero and the villain at the same time. I think it'll just gel better. You'll see why at the end. Peter has faced plenty of terrible villains, but none has been a greater blight on his life than the Green Goblin. Norman Osborn is New York's most brilliant monster, the devil who wears a millionaire's smile by day and a jagged purple and green grin by night. CEO of Oscorp, widowed father, ruthless empire builder, he was already a man who believed the world belonged to him, until his own experimental strength-enhancing formula blew up in his face, literally and figuratively. The explosion seeped the chemicals into his body and his mind. It cracked open whatever thin wall had kept his ambition from turning into pure cackling madness. Now he's two people in one skin. The coldly charismatic tycoon who buys mayors and sells weapons to both illegal and legal, and the Goblin, a green-skinned psychopath who rides a bat-shaped glider through the skyline, dropping razor bats and pumpkin bombs. Like Halloween came early and stayed forever. Superhuman strength, genius-level intellect sharpened to a murderous edge, healing factor that lets him survive falls that would pulp a normal man. He has every gift Peter Parker has, plus money, resources, and zero conscience. His obsession with Spider-Man is personal, it's pathological. He sees in Peter the son he could never control, meaning Harry, and the better man he refuses to admit he could have been. Every single scheme, laughing fit, and bridge explosion is just his way of yelling, "I can't be loved, I'll be feared instead." If the world won't bow to Norman Osborn, it will burn for the Green Goblin. And the parts of Norman's unfractured psyche still like to believe that he does all this for his legacy, for Harry, or maybe for some vague sense of human progress, but the Goblin knows the truth. He loves the chaos, the power, the way the city screams his name in terror. Norman Osborn wants to rule the world. The Green Goblin just wants to watch Spider-Man's world burn, preferably with all of Peter's loved ones still in it. And most days, Norman doesn't even try to stop him anymore. So, setting out to make the Green Goblin good, my first thought is that we've got a perfect example to build off of: Batman. Norman Osborn is a genius billionaire whose company has an extensive military technology division, and we're going to be making him into a superhero? All we need is a little tragedy to kick things into gear. So, Norman was born a man of honor and integrity, virtues he did his best to live by and instill in his son, Harry. And while running Oscorp, along with his various charity programs, it was very difficult to balance his life as a single father. Norman always did his best, though. He did drop the ball one time. A meeting ran long, and he missed one of Harry's college football games. Unfortunately, it was the last time his son would ever play. That night, Harry was found dead in the middle of the field, along with several other players and cheerleaders. The police had no leads on this terrible massacre, and Norman was completely devastated. His empire of wealth was worth nothing without a son to pass it on to. So, he decided he would find justice. He couldn't actually look into the crime scene himself without the police stopping him, or someone recognizing him on the streets, so he decided to take a different approach. He had his research teams develop a cutting-edge set of military armor that would hide his identity, increase his strength, and let him do what the police couldn't. Equipped with a flying glider to soar around the city, the highest tech surveillance and detective gear, and a set of concussion grenades for self-defense, Osborn became the vigilante detective Green Ghost. It didn't take long for the Ghost to uncover a connection between this massacre and similar deaths around the city. The bodies seemed to have been brutalized by something with superhuman strength. The police thought knives were used to slice them up, but closer investigation showed the cut patterns were almost like claws on a human hand. And deaths like these had been happening in isolated incidents all around the city. Prime suspects in various high-profile criminal cases from the past 3 years were often found dead with the same wounds shortly before their trials, along with several professors from all around the city, all of which happened to be on the board of admissions at their colleges. Eventually, Norman is able to follow the red thread to its source, connecting all the clues and discovering his mark in the act. A horrifying villain dressed like a spider, wrapped in a cape of webs. When Green Ghost confronts him, the villain really likes the way his story sounds and takes the name for himself: the Red Thread. The two fight, Osborn desperately wanting to get justice for his son, but the Red Thread just mocks him the whole time, superhumanly strong, effortlessly dodging every single attack, and somehow stopping mid-fight to walk straight up the wall and across the ceiling. All of this made worse by the fact that he never stops cracking jokes about his victims. Norman is terrified and only manages to survive the encounter by throwing one of his pumpkin concussion grenades. From that day, the Green Ghost vows to track down the Red Thread and bring him in, and chooses to protect New York City from other threats until he can find his vengeance. Every time the two clash, Norman is hopelessly outmatched. He considers using an experimental drug developed by Oscorp scientists, meant to increase his strength and senses, but every time he refuses because he worries that it may affect his mind and cause him to become more violent than he intends to be. That is, until he finally discovers the Red Thread's secret. The Green Ghost detective work eventually uncovers the truth. The Red Thread's first and forgotten victim was a high school student years ago, Flash Thompson. and the thread himself is none other than Peter Parker. Harry's longtime friend from high school, practically a surrogate son to Norman. The boy was at Harry's funeral, and the two have talked countless times since then. His world comes crashing down as he puts everything together. Peter was a poor, underprivileged kid who was relentlessly bullied and secretly despised the wealthy Norman, who always offered to help his Uncle Ben and Aunt May pay for things. One day, on a field trip to Oscorp's Animal Research Division, Peter was bitten by an escaped radioactive spider, and developing arachnid powers, he used them to commit petty crimes to make money. As Peter became more accustomed to his power, he loved the way it made him feel, to dominate others, and started picking fights at school just so he had an excuse to pummel the other students. Shortly after his Uncle Ben died of a heart attack, Peter lashed out for the first time, trapping and murdering his longtime bully, Flash Thompson, committing the crime while wearing a costume to hide his identity. From there, Peter treated murder as a hobby. He would keep an eye out for criminals on trial, people that he believed deserved to die and whose deaths the police wouldn't investigate, and then killed them himself. And as he grew older and his appetite for vengeance grew stronger, he started lashing out at everyone who had ever wronged him, including Harry, who he had always envied for his wealth and popularity. Learning that the boy he'd seen as a surrogate son was the one who killed his only flesh and blood, Norman finally broke. He chose to take the experimental super serum. It filled his body with strength, enough strength to finally fight the Red Thread on even footing. Norman was finally stronger than Peter, finally able to achieve justice. But just as he had won the fight, as he was getting ready to detain the serial killer, a switch flipped in his mind. I said Green Ghost was inspired by Batman. That was a little bit of a fib. He's more inspired by Moon Knight. Norman's new alternate personality awoke for the first time that night, the Wraith. It wailed on Peter, striking him over and over again with every intent to kill him. Norman was only able to gain control for a moment, long enough for Peter to escape. Stumbling into the sewers to try and get away from the Wraith, Red Thread collapses from blood loss and exhaustion. He would have died down there if he wasn't saved by a wandering alien symbiote. Every night since, the Green Ghost glides over the streets of New York, battling against his bloodthirsty alter, the Wraith, while down below, the Black Thread stalks him right back, the two in an eternal dance to find and destroy the other first. Stay frosty.